Thank you very much, Fernando. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Today we will summarize the results of the PV Grid Parity Monitor for Mexico. First of all, we wanted to let you know that Eclareon was the company that used to make these reports, but recently Eclareon Spain merged with Creara to form Creara Energy Experts and consolidate their leadership in sustainable energy services. From now on, the Grid Parity Monitor series will be developed by Creara Energy Experts. The PV Grid Parity Monitor Mexico issue is sponsored by renowned international companies. Jinko Solar is a platinum sponsor and in the team the co-sponsor. As always, we are supported by the European Copper Institute and our technical partner is Geomodel Solar, and ANES was our partner association. Okay, now let us see the PV market development in Mexico. As you might know, Mexico right now is undergoing a thorough energy reform. Therefore, we have been updating each month our results depending on the news and the new regulations being approved. In this sense, the situation right now, which is undergoing a major change, is as follows. All electricity was to be sold through the CFE, the Comisión Federal de Electricidad, the Mexican Public Utility Company. So, for instance, this is changing right now. We had an independent producer that could participate in the market through the CFE, through public tenders. We had the small-scale producer that sold the surplus electricity through a regulated price, that it was set at 98% of the CTCP price at the particular node. And then we have the self-consumption or autoabastecimiento that sold the energy, the surplus, at a regulated price that is below the market cost. We also have regulated consumers and the opportunity to use a net metering support scheme for residential consumers. However, the idea is that the market will be open for private enterprises looking to supply electricity to major consumers. So the design after the energy reform it is expected to be implemented next year is as follows. We will have a wholesale electricity market where private enterprises or anyone that wants to sell their electricity can attend, and they are able to sell their electricity at the spot price. We will also have tenders, specific tenders for instance, for photovoltaic, in order to also participate in the wholesale electricity market. Another point to note is that a new agent will appear in the value chain. These are the qualified users. The qualified users are those large consumers, industrial or commercial consumers, that will be able to participate in the market and buy their electricity through another agent that will be the one to perform the operations. And the electricity will be bought through the suppliers of qualified users, some new party that will also enter the energy scheme in Mexico after the liberalization of the market. We will also have the last resort suppliers, as is the case, for instance, in Spain or another markets. And we will still have the suppliers of basic service service that will sell electricity to the basic supply users, which are the relatively smaller consumers. So basically, after some months, we will see the liberalization of the electricity market, and the situation for photovoltaics will likely change. At the moment, the photovoltaic development is relatively halted because there is no full information regarding what the situation will look like for photovoltaic development and the support for the technology. However, in Mexico, we have relatively high levels of solar irradiation, so the conditions for photovoltaics are very good, and also the irradiation is homogeneously distributed in all of its territory. So the potential for photovoltaics is not only in the north region, but also in the south and in the middle of the country. We have also compared this irradiation in Mexico with some cities in Europe in order to have an idea on the levels of irradiation found in the country. For instance, in the north of the country, in the city of Hermosillo, we have irradiation levels that are above the highest levels in Europe, for instance, in Las Palmas, in Spain. The irradiation in Mexico City is comparable to that in Marseille, in the south of France, that presents the highest irradiation levels in France. And lastly, in the south of the country, we could have irradiation levels similar to those in Rome. Also, the evolution of the turnkey prices, the EPC price, that is the main investment cost for a PV system in Mexico, they have been decreasing sustainably. We will see it right now when we show the evolution of grid parity of the LCOE. They have been decreasing significantly. We can see that for, depending on the size of the system, the EPC cost, it ranges between 1 and 2 euros per watt peak, or for instance, for residential consumers, we could have near 3 euros per watt peak. In comparison to the situation that we have in Europe, or the situation, for instance, in the US, what we see is that whenever we have a currency depreciation in Mexico, the LCOE, or the competitiveness of PV, is affected, because many of the equipment are imported. And also, on the other hand, whenever we have import duties, it also negatively impacts the competitiveness of PV. As the market gets more and more mature, we will see EPC prices more and more similar to those that we can find, for instance, in Spain. But if we compare these prices with other Latin American countries, we see that the situation in Mexico is quite competitive. For instance, if we compare with the prices in Brazil or in other countries in South America, perhaps excluding Chile, we see that the situation in Mexico is relatively favorable for PV development. Also, you can find the sources of information in our full report that it's published in Leonardo Energy. And there you will see that our sources of information are local installers. Whenever we update the Grid Parity Monitor, we ask for the updated turnkey price, including all the applicable taxes, to local installers. On the other hand, we have the electricity prices. We compare the electricity prices that are the alternative to consuming a kilowatt hour generated by a PV system. So to compare, to analyze the evolution of, for instance, the short-term cost, the CTCP, is very important because investors will take a look at the pattern of savings. If we see that the situation is like the one we can see in this graph, where the CTCP varies very significantly from 2009 to 2014, this has a negative impact on the business case because more uncertainty results in higher required returns from the investors. Also, we should take these conclusions with a grain of salt because right now the energy market is undergoing an energy reform and we don't know how the system will look like and what will happen to the electricity costs. However, we can say that whenever we have uncertainty, it negatively impacts the business case of photovoltaics. Another point to note is that the residential tariff is being subsidized. We can see that the tariff 1 is the lowest tariff in the market, and we can compare it with the tariff for residential consumers that have a relatively high consumption, that are the domésticos de alto consumo, the domestic consumers with high consumption, that pay a tariff that is more than double the tariff that residential consumers that are being subsidized pay. However, the DAC consumers are a very low percentage of the residential segment. So we will show the results for the residential segment, the commercial segment, and the utility scale segment. For the case of the residential and commercial sectors, we have evaluated grid parity proximity in the following way. We have analyzed the evolution of the grid electricity price, that is the relevant tariff of the segment that we are analyzing, and we have compared this value with the levelized cost of electricity. That is the metric that we use to assess the cost of 1 kilowatt hour of PV electricity. So our evaluation concludes that PV electricity is competitive whenever it is cheaper than the grid electricity price from the grid. So, for instance, in the residential segment, if we find that the LCOE is below the tariff 1, the tariff that consumers pay, the variable component of the tariff, we can conclude that for the residential segment, it is more attractive to have a PV system for self-consumption than to buy electricity from the grid. And in Mexico, this is more so the conclusion, because we have a net metering system that allows the prosumer to value the excess electricity exported to the grid. So the results of grid parity proximity in the residential segment show that for DAC consumers, both in Mexico City and in Hermosillo, the city that we used as reference of higher irradiation, of a high irradiation location, in both cities we find that there is full grid parity. As we can see, the grid tariff for this residential segment is above the levelized cost of electricity. The levelized cost of electricity has been diminishing at a rate near 15% in both cities. This was driven mainly by a decrease in EPC costs and margins across the board in Mexico. On the other hand, from the regulatory perspective, net metering is still in place, although the energy reform is being developed. We find that net metering is still in place, and so the consumer can benefit from this scheme that allows each kilowatt hour exported to the grid to be valued at the comparable cost of a kilowatt hour from the grid, because the compensation is performed on an energy basis. 1 kilowatt hour is equal to 1 kilowatt hour that is able to be consumed in the future with a 1-year term. If we compare the situation of Mexico with other countries, we find that Mexico is very well positioned for self-consumption, because both from the regulatory perspective as from the economic perspective, we see that the situation is almost optimal for the development of the market, for market creation. This graph was taken from the Grid Parity Monitor, the 3rd edition of the residential segment, that you can consult in Leonardo Energy website. Now let us see the situation of commercial consumers. Here we have depicted the situation of 3 segments. The Tariff 2, that is consumers with contracted power below 25 kilowatts, and we have also included the Tariff 3 and on tariff, that are consumers with higher contracted power. In this sense, we can see clearly that consumers with contracted power below 25 kilowatts have reached full grid parity. That is, for these consumers, it is more attractive to self-consume PV electricity than to buy electricity from the grid. However, for the rest of the segments of the commercial tariff, we see that that is not the case at the moment. This could possibly change as the regulatory reform is developed. So we should monitor this very, very closely in the coming months. So the conclusion for the commercial segment shows that Mexico is also very well positioned, because we have a solid support scheme. But from the economic point of view, we just saw that only for those consumers with lower contracted power, PV electricity is cheaper than electricity from the grid. If we compare to the situation in other countries, such as the one in Italy and Germany, we see that the economic case for commercial consumers in these countries is clearer than that we find at the moment in Mexico. However, from the regulatory perspective, the situation in Mexico is very favorable. So now let us summarize the situation in the utility scale segment. In this segment, the analysis uses a methodology that is a little bit different, because we wanted to analyze the situation that we find in practice in the market. And what is that situation? That situation is such that the investors of utility scale plants, they require minimum return, and they receive a reference price for the electricity that they sell in the market. In the situation that we analyzed, we compare the case of an investor that receives for every kilowatt hour sold to the market, the 98% of the CTCP price. However, this is the situation pre-reform. We are yet to see what happens when the energy reform unfolds. However, the situation right now sets a required return for in return of the income for each kilowatt hour sold to the grid, and we have set the turnkey prices that are present at the moment in Mexico, and the value that we set as the unknown is the tariff that would satisfy the return requirements of investors. This is the required return, that is the unknown, and we compare this with the reference price in the wholesale market. We have set the IRR as the cost of equity as the known, and the unknown would be the cash inflows that would satisfy these requirements, such that the NPV of the investment is zero. So the requirement returns are fully satisfied, and the investor has an incentive to invest. But the results show that given the evolution of the CTCP price, the required tariff is above the tariff the investor receives. This is given the IRR that is required in the market. So at the moment, if we compare the required tariff to the benchmark price in 2014 semester 1, the situation is not attractive for PV investment in the utility scale segment. This is not true if we compare the situation from 2013 and before, because as we see, the benchmark price was above the required tariff. What will happen in the future, given the uncertainty of the node prices? This could increase, or it could remain below the required tariff. This is unknown. However, we do think that in analyzing the long term, that is 20 years, the trend is overall increasing for node prices. So, taking into consideration the energy reform that is undergoing at the moment and the uncertainty in the market, we think that at first the PV market could grow slowly, but in the medium term, we think that the market could reach 3.5 gigawatts of cumulative capacity. These are consensus estimates of the PV market. In this graph, we see the annual installed PV capacity, and the blue bar represents the high scenario. And what we believe is that at first the evolution could be near the low case, the low scenario, that is the red bar. However, when the energy reform unfolds, perhaps in 2016 or 2017, the forecast could be in the blue bar, increasing towards 2020. So the conclusions of of the study is that the energy reform is underway. So given that it has not been implemented fully, the PV market in Mexico is currently stagnated, waiting to see what happens in practice. This is especially for industrial and utility scale segments, in order to see the design of the wholesale electricity market and the conditions for the tenders that could be introduced in the near future. We think that the liberalization of the market with the spot market and the energy tenders will be positive for the development of the PV market in the long term. The market volumes will depend on how fast the regulation is implemented and on the final design of the market. Regarding the residential and commercial segment with the net metering scheme, we see that grid parity has been reached for certain segments, and we think that this represents a major opportunity because net metering is still in place, and the trend for electricity prices in this segment is increasing. Irradiation is also very good in Mexico, and the whole economic business case is positive for this segment. We think that investment appetite is up for PV in Mexico. However, we think that the bottleneck for the development of this kind of PV plants and investments, apart from the energy reform, is the innovation that is needed in the financial system to offer financing solutions for investors. In particular, we see that for PPAs and third-party financing, there is a long way to go still for Mexico. Thank you very much for your attention. You can write to us at dsa@creara.f if you have any comments or any requirements. We will soon publish the utility scale update of the Grid Parity Monitor. Thank you very much.